This podcast may contain disturbing content for some listeners. It's intended for mature audiences. Listener discretion is advised. This is True Crime XS.
A Leander woman has been missing now for more than a week. Eleanor Pierce was last seen Saturday, February 18th at her home on Darlene Drive. Her family tells us that she left everything behind, including her ID and her purse. She was wearing a black windbreaker, blue jeans, and brown hiking boots. If you have any information, you're asked to call police. Boaters discovered a body on Lake Travis less than a mile from where a woman disappeared less than 2 weeks ago. That body was found about 1 o'clock this afternoon on the shoreline in the 9800 block of Trails End Drive, a 5-minute walk from where Eleanor Pierce's home was in the Leander area. Shannon Wolfson has been following this story and has the very latest from the scene.
Investigators on scene this afternoon are telling us it is just too early to tell who this person is. They have obviously noted the close proximity to Eleanor Pierce's home. The body was found here on the shoreline of Lake Travis, really just around the corner from where Pierce was last seen at her home. Investigators said because of the condition of the body, they just can't identify it right now. Just a little while ago, Pierce's sons were here talking to investigators, obviously very upset at the possibility this could be their mother. They have been in town searching for her for several days. In fact, they joined a group of nearly 50 volunteers this past Sunday searching this very same area. The leader of that group, Texas Search and Rescue, says they are heartbroken.
We're volunteers, and so we do this for the families. That's why we do it.
I know her family is here from out of state, and we wanted to be able to find her alive and well for them before they went back to their homes. But at this point, we can't give them any positive news.
The body was pulled from the water here at Lake Travis just a little while ago. They're en route now to the medical examiner's office where the ME will try to determine who this person is and how they died. We are hearing that could happen as early as tomorrow afternoon. We'll keep you updated. Reporting from Lake Travis in the northwest Travis County, Shannon Wolfson, KXAN News.
So Keith does this thing where he's like describing watching a woman walk her dog. Eleanor Pierce was walking her dog. Depending on who you believe, the last time anybody saw from her was either the 14th, the 15th, or the 18th down in Texas. She's walking her dog along a lake. There's a little greenway trail that runs through there. She stood out to me as like, maybe he was confessing to that. Now, when we look at it just on the surface, her husband's the one who says, well, she was last seen on the 18th. And there's like stuff that went back and forth between them. But all I do, this happened in 2012, this is 10 years ago. So I just reach out and say, hey, could I take a look at the narrative of the autopsy report? I say it like it's just having a conversation with him. But what I was really doing was I filed an open records request. I wait. It gets denied. But then they also include the Texas Attorney General in the conversation, like one of the deputies, to make a decision. So they basically say that the county medical examiner is going to deny this under a certain provision, but they want the Attorney General to rule on it. They want a ruling that they're correct. So what they're citing is, what I wanted to know was, is this an accident? Was this a natural death? What was this? The citing that they give me is that it was a crime, but they've never arrested anyone. They've searched the house. Meg and I sort of looked at it, and under normal circumstances, if we didn't know anything about the couriers, we would just go, we know what happened there, and move on. And there's a lot of crimes like that. There are a lot of crimes like that where you just look at it, and you know that what happened was not a decompensating serial killer. There's a pretty obvious answer to what happened to those people. In this case, if I didn't know anything about the couriers, that's what I would think. But because I know about Bill and Lorraine Courier, who are still missing, by the way. And I know about Israel Keys saying he was watching a woman walking her dog. I can't help but think, what happened to Eleanor Pierce?
Well, I've been looking at these bodies found in rural areas. This woman went missing in Binghamton, New York. She went missing sometime after March 22nd, 2009. On its face, that's not super interesting overall, but she went missing. What became interesting about it was you have this thing that you've said about Deborah Feldman, who would have been the April 2009 victim of Israel Keys. You've always said you thought he got like times mixed up when he was talking. Like he talked about how things were fuzzy.
Right. He actually, I didn't come up with that. Like he said that.
I have to sort of remind myself of that.
Well, and I don't know exactly what it was with regard to. He did not elaborate. However, when he was having the conversation with the investigators, something was repeated back to him that he had said earlier at some point, and it registered with him that it was incorrect information. And, I've never been able to really nail down exactly what it is, but something, he realized that while he wasn't lying, he had somehow, misconstrued one of the timelines he had given.
I've started to take it to heart. It could very well be true that we're applying some things incorrectly to sort of the story of Israel Keys. But this woman's case has stuck in my head for so long. And I've been going around doing all these little searches and stuff, which we'll get to those in a minute. But this woman's name is Keisha Roman. And I don't know if you ever came across her or not. But so she goes missing from Oak Street in Binghamton, New York. And then, so that's sometime between March 22nd and, shortly thereafter, she's reported missing from her Oak Street residence in Binghamton. And then in September of 2009, her skeletal remains are found off of Harmony Road in about 30 minutes away, but it's in Pennsylvania. So, they ended up crossing over state lines. Her case ends up looking a lot like, Brittany Pert and these other cases where when I go to ask for information, it's an open case. They don't want to give me information, even though, the case is more than 10 years old at this point. I was really bothered by that case because it's a New York case. It's a homicide, but it wasn't a homicide for months. So they weren't investigating it like it was a homicide. And because of that weird jurisdiction problem, meaning she went missing in Binghamton, New York, and the area she's found in doesn't even have a police department, which is something I ran into with some of these other cases that I've been working on. There's no police department there, and they're right on the fringes of not even being in the sheriff's jurisdiction. So the state police have the case in Pennsylvania investigating this New York victim from Binghamton who was, brought across the state lines, and all they found was skeletal remains. And that just, cases like that really, they bothered me. And I had gone through, as you've probably seen it in the show notes, I had gone through pretty deep, trying to sort of go full circle back to what started all of this for me. And even though I was interested in Israel Keys, as soon as I found out about him, and I can tell you exactly where I was sitting and what I was doing, and when I heard about Israel Keys for the first time, I heard that he had killed himself. That's when I knew who Israel Keys was. And going back through things at that point in time, where I got super interested in him again, beyond just serial killer guy, it was a Daniel Imbo and Richard Petrone case. That's the case that has stuck with me. And largely because I was always curious, like, how they ended up on his computer in this like list of FBI things. So when I found that out, that made it more interesting, not less. And partly because like we knew he had killed the couriers, so I guess it like incorrectly stuck in my head, like, oh, if he killed one couple, he would kill another, which, like, realistically, as we go along here, we should have been looking more for a progression of him probably having killed children first, when long time ago, and then, you know, gradually as he got older, killing prey that was appropriate for him. I don't think he would have been killing couples way back when. Particularly, I don't think like a couple like Danielle Imbo, who was from Camden, New Jersey, and Richard Petrone. I don't think that's the type of couple that he would have killed. Although, like, there were ways I could stretch my imagination and make that possible. So.
Right, but we have an account of him with the couriers where things got out of control, and I've always kept that in the back of my mind because it was hard. That was a hard. It was hard for him to, you know, kind of be in that situation with them. So from there, it makes me wonder, like, well, actually, it makes me think he wouldn't have been capable of controlling a lot of people or. Like the dynamic there, he was easily overpowered, or not overpowered, but it was enough to like mess him up. Like, cause you know, he talked about like things didn't go as planned. And, so it makes me think that he didn't have a whole lot of experience in that situation.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
Well, that's how we landed on Zach and Sally. That was more like what we thought a couple or a pair would look like with him, where he got one and then close proximity ended up getting another person. Maybe
I don't think
got a little bold.
Would have had them both at the same time, though.
No, I don't think so either. That's one of the problems I kept running into with him. Is I think, you know, largely I've never fully understood how I got stuck on couples, but you know, the fact that there was another couple there on his computer.
I unfortunately think that Danielle Imbo and Richard Petrone, I feel like they're probably in the water.
Yeah, no, we went over that at length. I agree with you. I think, and that's
unfortunately probably out in the ocean somewhere at this point.
Yeah, as far as their bodies go, I don't know. Like, I've been to that location where they would have gone missing from. I've spent a lot of time in New Jersey, and I do occasionally, you know, get across the river there. But that one really, that case has always bothered me because I can't quite make like the theories fit that apply to that. I actually even lived near the person that she shared a child with, so her case has always really sort of bothered me. And I don't know if that was a hit. The idea was that it was like a very professional kill. So I don't know if that's the case or not. But I went down this rabbit hole in the case of, you know, searching for keys, where I went back over that case and I went back over the Courier's case. I wanted to put to rest for me once and for all, like whether or not he might have been searching for victims with those names or those locations. And the conclusion I came to, which will end this for me today, but different than where I started out. But when I went hunting, like, this is how my mind works when it comes to this stuff. I was thinking, like, okay, so Danielle is her name. Maybe he wasn't even looking for Richard. Or maybe he was looking for Richard, and that's a whole different rabbit hole. But for all we know, he didn't know anything about her. Danielle was from New Jersey, even though she went missing from Pennsylvania. She was from New Jersey. She was from Camden, New Jersey. So I dug into NamUs. Because of, you know, Danielle Imbo being in the comparison searches, I dug into NamUs from 1997 or 1998 until 2012. There were 9 active missing persons cases with the first name Danielle. 3 of them were from Florida, 2 were from Texas, and 3 of them, including Danielle Imbo, who, like I said, went missing from Philadelphia, are from New Jersey, and the last one was from Washington State. So that's where I like started down this rabbit hole of like, looking at these missing persons cases. I think the saddest one for me is Danielle Day. So these were all interesting possibilities for victims because of that idea. So I started poking around and looking to see who was still being looked for. And I genuinely think the saddest one for me is the March 30th, 2001 disappearance of Danielle Day. And the reason it's the saddest one is because she had a very small child at the time who is now, old enough and aware enough that she's looking for.
Because they would be 20, right?
Yeah.
So Danielle Day was last seen at her brother's girlfriend's home in Lindenwood, New Jersey on March the 30th, 2001. She's never been heard from again. It wasn't uncharacteristic of her to leave without contacting her family for extended periods, so her family wasn't initially concerned. Her brother reported her missing on May 15th, so that's about a month and a half after they had last seen her. Danielle Day was born in Maine, and at the time of her disappearance, she worked as an exotic dancer for the now defunct Fantasy Show Bar on Black Horse Pike in Mount Ephraim, New Jersey. She frequently spent time in Brooklyn, New York, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and Camden, New Jersey. She left behind 2 children who were in foster care at the time of her disappearance. Day had visited them occasionally. She was involved in prostitution at the time of her disappearance, and her daughter believes she could have become a victim of human trafficking. Little information is available about Danielle Day's disappearance. Her children were eventually adopted by their maternal grandmother, and they are now adults looking for answers in their mother's case.
Yeah, and her Danielle's brother recently passed away. So I was going down this rabbit hole on this case where I don't know how many exotic dancers you knew in the 90s. I knew a couple. Did you know any?
No, but this case immediately makes me think of what? Long Island Strangler? What is the case?
The LISK, the Long Island, he's a Go-Go Beach serial killer or the Long Island serial killer.
Where he was leaving bodies like 100 yards apart or whatever.
Yeah, there's the eastbound, there's several of them up there.
Well, that is what I immediately thought of, and I was wondering if I actually don't know a whole lot about those cases. I know that somebody was picking off girls, it seemed like.
Well, believe it or not, like a lot of those, like while the murders are old, a lot of the information just started dribbling out in like 2013 or so. So, slowly but surely, we're starting to understand more about those types of killers. I mean, realistically, the Long Island serial killer probably is not the only one. There's this area in New Jersey where like they used to find bodies once a week or whatever. But anyways, Danielle stuck out to me, and it goes back to this question of, did Keyes kill prostitutes, et cetera, et cetera. She doesn't fit. Ultimately, she does not fit because of the timing of everything. It's nearly impossible. But her case was interesting, and I wanted to mention it because I noticed that one of the kids is pushing to get as much information out there as possible. And they have a new detective on this case. The reason these cases are complicated, and I was referencing having known exotic dancers in the 90s, which it's a different thing today. But back then, the way it would work is girls who were popular at certain places or unpopular at certain places for whatever reason, they would sort of do you have to picture it like an indie band tour. So they would plan it out in their head, even though it may not go that way, that they were going to go to this city and hit these locations and dance and stay at this place. And then, they would do that. Where I experienced it was very strange because there were actually 3 states involved. So they would hit they would try and hit the beaches at certain times of the year because, they wanted to hit them during like high tourist season. And then they would, be in the college towns at the beginning and end of semesters. So
you're talking about exotic dancers?
Yeah, that's strippers don't work in one place. Exotic dancers did not work in one place.
Sounds like you're talking about like escorts.
No. This is so that line is super blurry, and it was even blurrier back then. And what she was doing, what Danielle was doing, from the description you just read, where she was hitting like Mount Ephraim, and then Brooklyn, and then Philadelphia, and then Camden, probably Atlantic City. That sounds
Where
like...
is she going when she gets there? Like,
she would get a shitty motel or some guy that she knew that she could stay with, and then she would perform at the different shows, depending on the rules, she would perform at shows at different, topless bars or fully nude bars, depending on the city and depending on the location. And some of it, like, what's interesting about those places is some of them are way worse off than others. Like, some of them are just like are barely an establishment with a liquor license or
why? So what is the incentive to travel and do that?
Well, so unless you have like some really well established regulars, and even if you do, you still travel. The idea is that you don't wear out your welcome, but also that whatever activities you're caught up in, you don't get caught. Okay. One of the people I knew was married, weirdly enough, but also a prostitute and exotic dancer. And I didn't know her from that world. I knew them from something sort of afterwards as they were trying to get their life together. But they would even, the two of them had her husband and her would travel with multiple girls. And I would call them frenemies because I don't think they really got along, but they, would split certain expenses.
Was he their pimp?
He was not their pimp. Like, this guy was not even confident enough to be like in the strip club. He didn't do strip clubs. He didn't do anything.
Competent or confident?
Confident.
Okay.
Like his shtick was he was able to get drugs in most of the locations they went to.
To sell or use?
There was a very blurry line there. I think he was mostly able to provide to them, and then they were selling.
Well, and so as you're saying, like sort of giving this vague account of what you're talking about, I've always had the impression, and I try so hard not to stereotype because I get really irritated when law enforcement does it. Prostitute murders, right? Or in these cases,
sex workers
are missing. Okay, but I have never thought to myself, oh, she must have been so confident, right? And so I in my mind, and I'm not saying you're wrong because I have no idea about any of this. I'm just saying it doesn't mesh up. For somebody to be like traveling around, it seems like, especially girls that end up disappearing, right? And presumably they've succumbed to, I feel like in some ways, it is a fate that they've chosen. It's just, they didn't intend to die on the way to where they were going. They were having a client or whatever, and the client got out of hand. But in my mind, I don't see like the ones that end up missing or are dead being super confident and then like not being super confident. It seems like they would want to stick to what they knew. But I do understand what you mean as far as like not getting caught or, being arrested or whatever. They'd want to keep moving, I guess.
Well, I think it was just a matter of like chasing the money. They would go where...
It just seems like so much work.
It was a lot of work. But so the guy I knew, and I don't associate with him anymore, although I still talk to some of the girls who are in that world, because, they're now soccer moms. That's the reason I'm being vague about my accounts of this, because, the girls that were my age at the time, some of them went on to get college degrees and have children and get married and move to the suburbs. And some of them didn't. But the reason I'm mentioning that guy is because he would run scams on the guys that the girls were seeing for like prostitution. And here's how that would work. The girl would have a room in a motel doing what's called in-call, meaning the men come into them, as opposed to out-call where the girls go location to location. And that's why I say this guy wasn't their pimp. First, he wasn't really capable of being their pimp. And I'm not saying that the girls were confident, because I think they all had various levels of self-esteem issues that they were dealing with. Some of them were confident and even overconfident. Some of them were not. But he would then go to wherever the guys came from, whether it was their car or a nearby motel or hotel or whatever, and rob them. He would rob their room or their car and take their shit while these girls were hooking up with them.
Because what are they going to do?
Exactly. What are they gonna what are they gonna say? What is how do they explain that? And it was very petty stuff that they were getting. It wasn't like they were like robbing a bank.
But don't you feel like okay, so yes, it is petty crime, but it's also some of the meanest crime that you can commit.
Oh, absolutely. It's up there with
I feel like karma bitch slaps people for that kind of thing.
Well, his life now is definitely proof that karma is a thing.
Well, I believe call it whatever you want. Like it comes back around, but it just seems like and maybe they just enjoy doing that. I can't imagine. I would feel really terrible if that's how I made money or got money, was by hurting other people, essentially, because they're already paying for the service, I assume, the in-call service or whatever, and then like they come back out and like their stuff's gone.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that all of that is necessarily attached to Danielle Day, but that is one of the easiest ways I can think of for somebody to disappear, is to get caught running one of those type schemes.
That is, I figure, and this, you had mentioned somebody earlier, and then we've talked about other girls before, and these girls are missing, but they just kind of show up randomly in the woods or whatever. Yeah. And I've always felt like it was something that, under different circumstances, the person that killed them wouldn't have killed them, and whatever happened to make it happen, like, is not something people normally die over. And so, like, for example, an in-call guy gets, too handsy or does something inappropriate, girl reacts, and he, snaps her neck by accident or whatever. And they end up being a body dump because they can't get caught with, right. And so that's how I see these cases go. And I understand that that's probably how law enforcement sees these cases as well. It's just, it is super sad. It is really, really sad. And, you saying that her kids are looking for what happened to her. I hope that they can find some closure, because that would be really hard.
Yeah. Well, that's probably the most heartbreaking part about some of these cases. But ultimately, this girl went missing in Lindenwold. She had ties to Camden, New Jersey. I looked at her because she was an early part of the year case, meaning, the Daniel Imbo case was 2005 or 2000. Yeah, I think it was 2005, but it was February 2005. This is actually March of 2001 on the surface, so it looks like it's the early part of the year, a couple of years earlier. However, when I start digging into it, she could have been missing at any point in time between March and like August or so, because of what I was describing, which is going around to these various cities and sort of collecting. I don't know how you want to say it, but customers or
they're on their dancing tour.
yeah, they're on their tour. So she was like, if she was on tour, we don't really know when this girl would have went missing, and that would be, I think that would be incredibly difficult for people to wrap their head around.
It took, a month and a half for her brother to report her missing, which it wasn't his fault because, that's actually not too bad. There's other cases where it's, 3 months, 6 months, a lot longer, basically.
Yeah. So that brings us to another Danielle. This is actually, technically it would have been Trenton, New Jersey that this Danielle went missing. So this is a September 7th, 2008 case. This is Danielle Nuttall. She may also be known as Danielle Nuttall Revert. She has a hyphenated last name. She was last seen on September 7th, 2008. Now, she lived off Hamilton Avenue in Trenton, New Jersey, and a coworker dropped her off at home. However, when that coworker dropped her off, it was 11:30 p.m., and the next thing that happened to her is a cab driver dropped her off at the Walter Rand Transportation Center in Camden.
If you read that for what it's worth, it switched.
What do you mean?
Well, it says that a cab driver dropped her off at Walter Rand Transportation Center in Camden, New Jersey at 12:30 a.m. on September 7th. She told him she didn't have enough money to get back to Trenton. She's never been heard from again. So that is her last contact, it says, according to that, except it would have to be either 12:30 p.m. or 12:30 a.m. on September 8th.
Right. You're right.
Because, so that's what I'm saying. But anyway, so I was a little bit confused. I assumed that was a mistake because it follows that she has never been heard from again. But go ahead. I just wanted to point that out.
Well, so she didn't have enough money to get back to Trenton. She's never been heard from again. Her family stated she'd been under a lot of emotional stress when she went missing. Her boyfriend was incarcerated, and she was having problems with her roommate at the time. She had an upcoming court date, and she mistakenly believed that she might be jailed. And she had a history of drug abuse and prostitution and a criminal record for offenses related to those two things. She had been clean for about 15 months, they thought, when she vanished. It is possible that she began to use heroin again, and she had a physically abusive significant other, but was trying to get away from him. However, she was sort of tied to him financially, and then he was locked up. Her family lives over in Egg Harbor, New Jersey, and they did end up reporting her missing on September 22nd, so that's 2 weeks later. She had frequented the Egg Harbor area because of her family, as well as Pacific Avenue area down in Atlantic City, New Jersey, which is an area known for its prostitution activity. And she had worked as a waitress at the Sticky Wicket restaurant at the time of her disappearance. Foul play is suspected in her disappearance, mainly because her dog was left behind. And she treated her dog like a child, her family said. And when police went to search her apartment, they found what they believed was blood on the walls and carpet. So whether she made it to Camden or whatever happened there, they did find blood in her Trenton, New Jersey apartment.
Okay,
now,
so
go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say she had a male roommate, but he was considered to have cooperated with the investigation. He wasn't named as a suspect or a person of interest. Her credit cards have not been used since she went missing. And about a half hour after she was last seen, her cellular phone was turned off, and she left behind multiple uncashed paychecks.
So, okay, the blood in the apartment is weird. And then the initial story of the two different accounts of the coworker dropping her off at home, and then a cab driver stopping somewhere, and either before or after. It seems like it's after. So what the heck happened? Like, either there's blood and she was like attacked or something in her apartment, right?
I don't know.
Or and so she was, maybe the cab driver, it was actually the day before that the cab driver had dropped her off and that she did make it back home.
It could be, yeah. I mean, I have trouble
Because
figuring
if
her
it was
case out.
12:30 a.m. on September 7th, that would be about 11 hours? No, 12:30 a.m. on September 7th versus 11:30 p.m. on September 7th. That's almost 24 hours, right?
Yeah, and that part threw me off when I was first reading about it. So I don't totally understand.
So here's what I thought. I thought, well, so a cab driver drops her off, right?
Right.
And that's the last. Apparently, that's the last she's been heard from. Except that a coworker drops her off at 11:30 p.m.
Yeah, I had to read it several times to
Well, it doesn't
understand.
make sense. And so, if the cab driver was the last person to see her, why is there blood in the apartment? And why, was she bloody in the cab? Like, it sounds to me like there should have been some more questions here. Just not even like suspicious questions, just more informational type questions, because it doesn't make sense. And then it kind of zips in and out of perhaps she went off on her own on purpose because she mistakenly believed she might go to jail for some of the stuff she had done. And so it's just really weird. Now, what kind of restaurant is the Sticky Wicket? Do you know?
Well, everybody that mentions it online has it in, I don't know what you want to call it, the big air quotes where you're mentioning something as bad. I did not. So Sticky Wicket itself, I don't like. That's close to Trenton, so I assume it's the place. When I look it up online, it has a totally normal menu. It has like a room where you can go in and do, like an event or something. It's not super interesting. It looks like there's a bar and liquor store that's attached to it because the laws are kind of weird up there. But the bottom line is, it didn't seem like Hooters or anything. So if Hooters is the PG-13 version of those type restaurants, is that what you're wondering about?
Because
the name, right?
I don't even. Well, yes.
Okay. So the name is a term that's used in the game of cricket, and so in cricket, when nobody wants to hear about cricket on this podcast, but in cricket, if the field is wet and dry at the same time, meaning that like it's rained or they've water's been run or anything like that, where the field is starting to dry up again, it means that the ball can bounce weird because like you can't get a feel for how to play. So it makes it difficult for the ball to be hit. And in life, like people say a sticky wicket would be a situation that is dangerous. So the name implies something interesting, but like there's nothing really going on at this salad bar here.
I was going to say, I've never heard anybody say sticky wicket.
It's not a U.S. term, really, because the U.S. is not a place where people play cricket to start with. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so this is just a normal restaurant then.
It seems like it to me. I mean,
Okay.
I didn't find anything interesting going on about the restaurant at all.
I think that Danielle Newtall Revert, okay, which that implies she was married at some point.
She was married to, she was separated at the time of her disappearance.
So you've got multiple, and she was seeing somebody that was in jail, right?
Yes.
So I guess if her boyfriend's incarcerated, he's got a pretty good alibi. The roommate isn't being called a suspect, but it's very carefully worded.
Well, so a guy that runs, I assume it's a guy, I don't know that for sure. I believe they were male. The undergroundmysteries.com is sort of a blog that captures a bunch of these stories. They had written on there that like her actual last name, her maiden name was Revert. And when I go through and do like a background check on her, I find it both ways. She has a lot of past residences, like a lot. And I wondered if she wasn't a bolter. If she didn't run. If it weren't for like the blood and stuff, I would think that
the police found what they believe is blood on the walls and carpet in her apartment. Like, they didn't luminol it. I'm so confused by this situation.
There was blood on the wall and carpet, but it's unclear whose blood it was.
Police found what they believe is blood.
Yeah, so this is one of those things. I think that you know this and that you're saying it for the clarification here. Okay, in a case like this, there would be no warrants to start off because she disappears. She's seen at basically like what people would visualize as the bus station. They're not going to get a warrant for her house. Like, even if the timing is backwards, like they would, like the idea of them getting a warrant to luminol and like check for DNA is very unlikely. And the likelihood that that apartment wouldn't be turned over in 30 days is also very unlikely. So this is not like a CSI type case where like people were on the spot collecting evidence.
Okay, but if the statement is there that they found what they believe to be blood, I feel like that should have been checked out.
I don't disagree with that. There was definitely, according to reports, at some point detectives examined her home for DNA evidence. However, that is as far as what's been made public goes, and I didn't find anything that was available to request. There is not much in this case.
Well, and so she's more than likely succumbed to foul play because she left her dog behind, and that no matter even if she was a bolter or whatever you were saying,
think she would have taken the dog? Yeah.
Well, if she bolted a lot, but she had I don't know how long she'd had the dog. That's a lot of times though, people, especially people who don't have like families, they really get attached to their dogs. And so, yeah, they're not going to leave them. And the fact that she left them means that she didn't leave them, that it wasn't her choice. And I would say that there's a number of things that could be explored here, and this is a case that could be solved. I mean,
yeah, I feel like ultimately this could be solved one way or the other.
Put the timeline in order accurately.
I found it both ways, so I don't know which one is accurate currently. There is a detective assigned to the case. I don't get the impression that there's going to be any callbacks for me on that.
Yeah, no, I don't. This case is not taking anybody's
time or attention.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe she did just run off, but I feel like the dog being left behind and the uncashed paychecks. I mean, come on, like this isn't a situation. Which I don't know, if she was a waitress, they might not have been for very much because you work for tips usually, but still.
Yeah. Well, so what the guy on undergroundmysteries.com put on for his to-do list was a background check to see if there's anything new in it. He's got like a 8-item checklist here. A DNA test. Asked the detective working on her case to, run financial assistance for the past 12 years, like food stamps, welfare, general cash, housing, assistance with utilities, because, that could be found. And then just circulating a story on Facebook, on Reddit, on high school alumni groups, and, making sure that there was dental information on file for unidentified bodies. So somebody out there cares, because what I found there is her brother states that the family was not asked to submit any DNA to law enforcement, and that he said he would reach out to contact the detective who was currently handling the case to ask if he could submit his DNA, like for potential matches. And then I guess Underground Mysteries had a conversation separately with Danielle's brother, who's not identified here, and I'm not going to identify him either, that they could go onto like GEDmatch or Ancestry.com and do the ancestry test and then upload it to GEDmatch. So, there are family members sort of on the fringes of this.
How much does it suck that a missing person's brother can't get his DNA in to be compared to, for potentially finding his sister. She's been missing for 13 years now.
I know.
About almost 13 years. It just seems like that would be something he shouldn't have to seek out. But at the same time, the circumstances aren't exactly clear. And I think it really sucks that it just really sucks. These cases really depress me.
Well, she would be 44 years old in August of this year. So this episode will actually air the week before her birthday, which is August 21st is her birthday. So, what was crazy about her case was her face looks familiar to me. Like, she looks like someone I know. I was very confused by some of the write-ups on her, but I was not confused by her face. It definitely looks like somebody that I've run into at some point. I'm not being literal. I'm saying, like, she just looks like one of those people that would be in your friends group that you would know. So
she also looks to be somewhat responsible. She's 31 years old, so
yeah.
But she did have an issue with. I was gonna say, did we completely make up that she was? Because I got off on a tangent. Oh wait, no. Okay, so here's where it was. So she worked as a waitress at the Sticky Wicket, which we sort of decided she was just a waitress, not anything to do with.
There's not anything sketchy going on.
Right. What I saw was that Pacific Avenue is an area in Atlantic City that she went to sometimes, and it was known for prostitution. We have nothing to suggest she was involved in it.
Well, yeah, we do.
What?
She had a pending court date about prostitution.
Oh, yeah. Okay, sorry.
She has a criminal record for prostitution and drug offenses. She was facing an upcoming court date. She thought she was going to jail.
Okay, I thought that we had just talked about this girl and kind of give it the, good old stereotype prostitute murder thing.
No.
And this girl had nothing to do with prostitution. And I was like, oh, wow.
No, I'm with you. I was very careful about that. I would not lead you down that path because I know it would piss you off later. I'm aware of, I don't like to link people to things that they're not linked to already publicly.
Right. And when I say, when I talk about prostitute murders, I'm saying, I'm not saying anything about the victims. I'm saying the reaction from law enforcement. That's how they've been treated. They've been treated like prostitute murders, which means that they're never going to be solved and nobody cares.
Yeah, they're treated as disposable people and disposable murders. Which brings us to, so we're going in order in time here. So we had a Danielle Day in 2001.
I appreciate that, by the way.
What?
The chronological order.
Oh, you appreciate that part? Well, I was trying to keep it, fairly simple for this. And then, so we had Danielle Nuttall, and that's 2008 in New Jersey. First name Danielle missing persons, the last one is from March 29, 2010. She was last seen in Seattle, Washington, when she had a supervised visit with her young daughter at the Child Protective Services office, and she has never been heard from again. Prior to her disappearance, this Danielle was involved with drugs and prostitution in the Pacific Avenue, again, because Pacific Avenue, Atlantic City for someone else. I believe that was Danielle Day, right?
No, it was Danielle Nuttall.
It was Danielle Nuttall. Okay. So, but
this is Pacific Avenue in Tacoma.
This is in Tacoma, Washington.
So Pacific Avenue is just something, huh?
And she frequented the Glacier Motel on Pacific Highway East in Fife, Washington. She had been homeless and sometimes went to the Nativity House and other day shelters. And this is Danielle Moten.
Merton, yeah.
And she gets the double whammy of being a drug and prostitute possibility related to her case and being a minority case in Seattle, Washington area in 2010. She was the most interesting one for a potential Israel Keys victim for me.
Because of her location?
Because of the Glacier Motel. That possibility, which, we mentioned that in the last episode, so now it's out in the world. I still think going to these no-tell motels that have survived and going through, their records, and I tested that theory. I went recently to one that had closed near where I live, and I was genuinely interested in the property for a different reason, but I asked them, I was like, do you guys keep records? And they said yes, they had all of the records back to 1978, but the 1978 to when they closed in the early 2000s, because the property is closed and it's currently for sale, the records that they have are in these old ledgers in boxes, so it would be a pain in the ass to go through them, but you could go through them. And I thought that was interesting that they did have their records, and they told me that according to where this little motel that I was looking at was, it's a state law that they have to keep them for X number of years. And I didn't know that. I'm not totally sure that's like 100% accurate on the part of the person who was telling me, but that's fine. If they think they have to keep them that long, that they should keep them that long.
It would be benefit. I mean, most, actually now I would imagine with digital records, stuff's just kept forever, it seems like, but that's, a newer thing. But I don't know. I have no idea what the laws are on that kind of thing, but
it's something I've never looked up before. I've never even thought about it.
Because who cares, really? But actually, it would totally be worth going through those stacks of papers, in my opinion.
I do want to talk about this, Danielle, before we move on to that. I absolutely want to point something out here. So, going through Washington State, I was looking for Miss Newton, I believe. I'm not totally sure how you pronounce her last name. And I don't know if you looked for her, but it's almost impossible to find anything on her. I did not find her having arrest records for serious felony offenses. I did find some other stuff going on, but it was all just infractions, and it was mainly related to her kids. So she would be a great starting point, although she's in 2010. So I don't know if that's a good time for Keys or not to be looked at.
I was wondering, do you feel like Keys has a cyclical...
everybody's got a cycle.
Right, but specifically to his activity, his criminal activities.
I've noticed a summer thing. I know he did Samantha Koenig in
February, March.
Yeah. I don't know how cyclical they were. It probably is. His stuff is probably related to. It's probably modified related to when he has his kid full time. That's probably weird because then he's dealing with a lot more. It's far more problematic to do anything when you have children around. But let alone when you have, it's just you and a child. Even though there's a partner involved, the partner, I think that they would be even more suspicious were he to be, running off. So I don't know what his cycle is, but we could probably at some point figure it out, but we would need more information. Looking at some of those other cases that we looked at, I think there's something around Easter. So I had sort of assumed that Easter and then that, June, July thing that he's doing, those were problematic for him. And then probably something around October when his kid was born.
So do you think that Danielle Newton is a good candidate?
I thought she was an interesting candidate. And, I went down a checklist with her. And, she's at a little no-tell motel out of the way. She's pretty much a forgotten case. It took place right at Easter, which has become a running theme for him to travel around Easter time. Ultimately, no. And so here's what happens with the Danielle thing. I then ran down middle names of missing girls named Danielle. And as far as middle names go, we have 7 Danielles. We have 7 missing persons whose middle names are Danielle. 2 of them are from Tennessee. One is from Oklahoma. One is from California. One is from Texas. One is from Delaware. And another one is from Washington State. This was Nicole Danielle Engel. And her case drove me a little nuts. Nicole Danielle Engel is a October 2001 case. She was living in Vancouver, Washington at the time. She was a student, and she also worked as a dancer at a club. On Christmas Day 2001, her mom reported her missing, so that was pretty much 3 months later. Very pretty girl, 19 years old, 5 feet 6 inches tall, 135 pounds. She was a Caucasian female, and for some reason, they say she has blonde hair, but I cannot find a single photograph of her. I found a dozen photos of her, and in every one of them, she has brown hair. But the missing persons statement and report says that she has had blonde hair. She had heavy-duty acne that she covered with makeup. Her ears are pierced. And she had a son at the time when she went missing named Tristan. And there's a tattoo of her son's name on her right ankle. She wears contact lenses and she goes by the nickname Nikki. So even though her middle name is Danielle, she goes by Nikki. Did you find out anything else about Nicole Danielle Engel?
Her date of last contact is different, but it looks like you said her mom last talked to her October 2nd. I think elsewhere maybe it says September 2nd. It doesn't really matter. She was missing for a couple months before her mom. I assume she didn't show up for Christmas, and that's what prompted the missing persons report.
Well, it looks like her mom had her kid.
Well, right.
And freaked out when...
Well, because probably she hadn't heard from her. So she said she hadn't heard from her since October 2nd. I assume she may have guessed that. I don't know. But time went by, and then, sometimes time goes by. And then she realized when Christmas came and she didn't show up, that was when there was a problem. Which is weird because you would think Thanksgiving would be a tip off, but I don't know. I don't know what the dynamic there was. Well, I did find out. So Nicole was married.
Okay.
Actually, I don't know if she's married at the time she went missing, but her marriage certificate was from the summertime of 2000.
Right.
And then I couldn't find divorce records, but I did find where her husband had remarried later. Like it was maybe 2006 or so. It wasn't like immediate. And so I don't know like how long they were together, how long it lasted. I don't know, but I do know she was married, or at least there was a marriage certificate. I don't know that there was a ceremony performed, but they got a certificate indicating they were going to be married. And then she's connected to a few. I actually looked to see if I could find her.
See if she was alive.
Alive somewhere, right. And she's linked to several things, but I have not found her alive. I feel like she's linked probably either through, her husband or her child maybe, but I haven't found any indication that she's actually alive.
Yeah, so she's one of those cases that doesn't go into NamUs until like a lot later. She actually goes into NamUs in 2009, even though she's missing in 2001. And you're right, I found multiple dates of her last contact, meaning the official missing persons report I had was December 25th, 2001. But essentially, anytime in the 3 or 4 months prior, she could have gone missing, and it would be very difficult to determine otherwise. But I found a wedding picture of her, by the way.
Yeah, I saw that.
That's why I was saying I think you're right on the marriage thing. Is because
I know that there's an official vital record in Washington. She was born in New Mexico, I believe, and then she's got an address in Idaho that's linked to her, and that's where her the man that she married, or the guy that she married, that's where he was from originally, and they both ended up in Washington. And so she's got a connection to an Idaho PO box, And that runs from, which these aren't, the timing on these things are never accurate. I don't know what they are based on, but they could be right, but they could also be off by a couple of years. And so that could make all the difference, really. But I believe she was tied to that like from 2000 to like 2019. So it was weird. And like I said, I don't think that it actually has anything to do with her. I think it's an association with her former husband, I guess. I don't see, I couldn't see on the subsequent marriage certificate where her husband remarried. I don't believe there was actually a copy available to look at, but so I don't know, like, was he marked as widowed or divorced or like what happened there?
So I ran into a problem with her case. And here's the problem that I ran into. First of all, I was doing the same rundown that you're doing on all of this. I found a link that should have been there for her that wasn't. And this is what led to this episode, because you have told me from the beginning that you did not think that the nameless comparison searches were useful.
Yeah, I don't. I feel like it was something to latch on to.
Right. So you followed these rabbit holes I've gone down, and you have the benefit of already knowing where this ends as far as what I did here. Nicole Danielle Engel had an FBI page. And for some reason, she has that FBI page after 2008, and she does not have it today. The FBI launched a brand new set of pages in October of 2010. And her page still existed in the format of what the pages in 2010 looked like. Because they reformatted how, it's www.fbi.gov/whatever. The way that they did that changed in 2010. Here's where Nicole Danielle Engel's page led me. First of all, it's not on the FBI website anymore. And for something to be removed from the FBI website typically means it's been resolved in some fashion. But in this case, it's not shared, which what I have found that to mean is that somebody found her alive. Typically, if the FBI has removed information like that, it means she got arrested for something and she showed up in NCIC.
So why didn't they pull her off of NamUs?
I don't know why she's not off of NamUs. I don't know what I don't know what is going on with that. Here's where Nicole Danielle Engel's case became very helpful in the hunt for Israel Keys. First of all, she's totally valid, potential victim, but that's not what makes her interesting. I went back through and decided to do a web archive search of the VICAP pages. VICAP is where the FBI keeps a program called the Violent Criminal Apprehension Program, and they dump a lot of information on those pages. For instance, right now, they have a serial killer they're looking for in Colorado, and on the VICAP page, they have a seeking info post. And that seeking info post has a bunch of clothing items that were found in the truck cab of the unnamed serial killer, who is probably Ben Rhodes, maybe. I'm not totally sure who it is, but they put a bunch of these photos up. We've talked about these types of posts before in the past. I went back through the archive pages after they changed the website. The specific thing that I was doing was I was putting together what it would have looked like after October 2010, but before Israel Keys was arrested. And I had to look through about 157 web captures. But I discovered something that I emailed to you that really both pissed me off, but let me know I can stop looking down these rabbit holes. And what I discovered was on the old VICAP missing persons pages and kidnapped persons pages from 2010 to 2012, if you hit it at a certain date and time, every single person who was on Israel Key's comparison searches were on the same page with their photographs. And if you clicked on their name, you got multiple photographs of them. So the comparison searches are useless because all that Israel Keys was doing was looking at the FBI's homepage and then their VICAP page after the couriers were known to be investigated by the FBI. That's before Israel Keys is caught. And the reason is they were helping them track the couriers' cell phones. And they also, the Vermont State Police had tracked down the courier's odometer mileage to, 40 missing miles?
Yeah, it was completely worthless because
it was a lot of work.
They were, it was a smart move. The problem was they didn't realize that, Israel Keys went on like half a joyride before he realized the car wasn't going to make it. And then he turned around and came back. And so they basically overshot where they thought the couriers could be. The couriers had a log of, somehow they were able to determine how many miles had been driven between the time that they went missing and the time the car was found. And
it was incredibly detailed to see.
It was very, some thoughtful investigative work. It's just the variable that, somebody drove it thinking they were going to go somewhere, but he ended up not going anywhere because, so that basically the farmhouse that the couriers ultimately were in, it would have been in the circumference, but they assumed that it was 20 miles out somewhere and 20 miles back.
Right. So the gist of, and this is from August of 2011, in case you're curious, you can actually go back and you can very easily find using either newspapers.com or some general web searches. You can find where, what paper was it? Burlington Free Press. They document the FBI's involvement in the courier's case, and that ultimately, that article, it ends the usefulness of the comparison searches that the FBI did with photos from Israel Key's computer and NamUs, because we know that he was looking at Bandit Tracker because he mentions it in passing during the it's not even an interesting mention during the recorded interviews, but they're talking about Bandit Tracker was an FBI page that was one click over from the VICAP page where they were posting back in 2010, 2011, and 2012, and they stopped, but they were posting bank robberies.
So what do you think, what do you imagine Israel Keys doing? Like how does he end up on the VICAP page or whatever?
I think that he said he read up on the couriers, and I think that he went over to the FBI page. I think he frequently checked the Bandit Tracker when it came out. I think that would have been a thing that he finally got paranoid about and stopped checking at some point. But I think he would have checked it when it first came out because it showed photos of bank robbers that hadn't been released anywhere else. He wanted to see if he'd been caught. And then I think he went over to the VICAP page because he wanted to see if any of his crimes had made the FBI's page. And the couriers may have been the first time that ever happened.
And do you think, so were they on VICAP or no?
Yes, they're mentioned on VICAP briefly under seeking information. When the FBI gets involved in August through October, several of the things that are done related to the cell phones or the FBI's, one of their CART teams is there. So when that happens, they are briefly on there. And the way that I found them was, if you go back into archive.org, into old websites, I went there and I put in Nicole Engel's page because I wanted to see what it had looked like back then. And what I realized was another thing that changed in October was the VICAP page suddenly got a slide bar on the bottom.
That slide bar had multiple photos in it, so if you can still pull it. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with archive.org and how it works. If you click on a page, you can look at it in the web archive, or Wayback Machine is what some people call it. But if you click on a link within a page, it will tell you it can't take you there. You have to copy the link and then look at it. So if they've captured it, they've captured it. If they haven't, they haven't. And with the FBI pages, they captured them sporadically. But one of the things that happened with that slide bar is the featured cases changed. But I was able to go in after the new website, so after October 2010, and I think you saw in the screenshots I sent you, I was able to almost duplicate the Israel Keys comparison searches. Like, for instance, like this first page is Ashley Summers, Tabitha Tutors, Amber Cates, Karen Adams, Carla Vincenti, Michaela Garrett, Kristen Smart, Richard Petrone, Suzanne Lyle, Lori Boffman, Asha Degree, Alexis Patterson, Danielle Barter. Daniel Barter, sorry. But the gist of it is, and then, the next one is Kristen Modafferi, Bethany Markowski, Daniel Imbo, Shayna Kirkpatrick, Jalique Rainwater, Jennifer Markham. My point is, Stephen Earl Kraft Jr. is on that page. I was able to, with one web link, one scroll, create the entire list, and I didn't do it on purpose. It created the entire list of the comparison sources from Israel Key's computer.
Right, and they were ultimately irrelevant.
And Brittany Pert was on there as well, who I had speculated was one of the unknown cases.
I felt like Keys was also looking. I do go on NamUs, but I don't actually. I don't really peruse the FBI website, but I imagine he was just seeing what was happening, because he would have kept it. He made references to things like, "I'm not the only one who's figured this out." That he said that kind of thing. And so I think he just, checked on things. And so that also answered a question for me that's sort of been longstanding. Now, it's funny that how you ended up getting to this point, because I had thought for a while I had not done the work you did on it as far as going into the Wayback Machine, because that thing just drives me crazy. But I had thought that, he probably just was looking at the FBI.gov website and all these pictures cached at the same time, just randomly, which is what you reproduced essentially, right?
Yeah, I went back and I was like, so I looked at it, and it was that article, because I had thought the couriers were never there, but he had said he looked up the couriers.
Right, and so that answered that for me. That's why he gave them the couriers above anybody else when he had misbehaved and was seeking to. Basically, he dug himself deeper, and then he was trying to get back out of his hole. Because remember, he was being chastised for trying to escape when, immediately prior to his confession on the couriers, he's like, "All right, if I can have my cigar and whatever else, I can't remember now what he did, I'll give you 2 bodies and a gun."
Yeah, and so the gun comes up in the news articles. It's mentioned in the blurb about the couriers that they may have.
He knew that there was information out there, and he knew that they potentially could have found information on his computer. Now, here's the thing that's just amazing. Like, his computer it's surprising, the forensic investigation that was conducted on it. Are you surprised by it?
They didn't do anything related to his computer.
That's what I'm saying. Like, isn't that surprising to you? If I had his hard drive, I would know everything he had done.
Yeah, I waffle back and forth on did they not do it, did they not release it with him, and
Maybe
the thing
they haven't released it. I would give you that.
that's sort of where I'm at with them. I mean,
I hope that that's the case.
Yeah, I hope that that's the case too. But ultimately, I think that either the FBI knows a lot more about Israel Keys than they're telling us, which makes no sense to keep that information back.
I don't think that's the case.
But I think some of the stuff that we've discovered, particularly with Rosie and Arlene, I think those cases are linked to him. And I think all of these cases where you could find a small no-tell motel nearby, you could go check to see if Israel Keys had been there.
I think that every hotel should just check and see if he's been
a guest and when.
And then let the FBI know.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
I think that should be the all call that they're making to people when they go on Dateline or 48 Hours. Check your motel registries between 1997 and 2012.
And so I've also, along with that, okay, so we're talking, I don't know if you are interested in art. I know that you are. But, sometimes in art, there's the direct piece that was made through whatever medium is being used. And then there's also the use of the negative space, right?
Right.
And so in a way, we've done all this work and it's piggybacked off of other people doing, like the FBI doing all this work, right? Because we got stuff that they released. And then we have stuff that we derived from listening to the interviews. We did that ourselves. But I've come to the conclusion, and we've talked about this a little bit in prior episodes. I don't know that it made it in, but I feel like the timeline is a red herring. The entire thing is a red herring.
Oh, absolutely. I think you would have to make a new... I think hotels and motels would clear that up. I think if you could find them, you would know what things were valid and what things weren't.
Well, you're right. You're absolutely right. Because all you have to do is find where he's been staying. Because he used his own name. And that, I feel like that could really be the key. And I've actually started in my mind thinking about okay, well, how could that work? And I think the best way it would work is if, because hotels just have to look for one name. That's it. And then tell the FBI if it comes up or not. It's not hard, and it's a worthy cause. If
all they need to do is half a dozen hotels coming up with stays that they had should spur. I know the FBI is not doing any work on this case, but it should spur them looking for it at that point. That's something that you put a couple of recruits on, and you give them cities to go look at. And that's how you develop a real timeline in this case. And I know that they will say they have done it, and I promise you they have not.
There is a timeline, and
I'm talking about strictly based on his hotel stays from 1997 to 2012.
I know that the whole NamUs, whatever they called it, NamUs search stuff, I was real excited about that at first, and I got a lot of information and I looked at it a lot of different ways, and then one day I was like, it's completely meaningless.
Thank you for joining us for our Cruel Summer episodes, where we go back to looking at Israel Keys. We are sponsored by LabRottiCreations.com. You can check them out at LabRottiCreations.com, and you can still use the code CRIMEXS for a fun pop pet portrait of your own pet. You can also reach us on Twitter, Instagram at TrueCrimeXS, or you can give us a call if you know anything about any of the cases that we're talking about at 252-365-5593. You can also reach us at Gmail at truecrimexs@gmail.com, and you can check out our website at www.truecrimexs.com. We'll see you next time.
This is True Crime XS.
Eleanor Pierce doesn't even come up in the episode today. Who comes up in the episode is sort of how we, ended up doing all of the research that became part of the podcast. And as you could tell, I'm leaning more towards bodies have been found that are victims of Israel Keys at this point. One of the biggest things about this case for me is sort of where it all started. And that goes back to the case of Danielle Imbo and Richard Petrone. At the end of all of this, the comparison searches, the list of 44 names on his computer, it's useless. And the reason it's useless is because it's literally just him looking at the FBI's VICAT page. That's it. He pulled it up on a certain day. That was the order of the pictures that were on the page, and that's why they're in his browser cache. That's it. That's all it was. It doesn't mean a thing in terms of Israel Keys victims.
When you first told me your name, I didn't hear a word you said, but it was written all over my face. Should've known it was you I would love until the end. When you made it down the aisle, every moment stole my breath. Bet you could see it in my smile. Should've known it was you I would love until the end. I don't know where this road leads. All I know is I wanna go with you in a life where there's no sure things. I am sure I wanna live it with you. If you look into my eyes, when our time down here is spent, it's in every single line. Hope you know it was you that I loved until the end.